On the offensive, Jeb Bush blames former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and President Obama for the growth of ISIS. Celebration, prayer, and work. Pope Francis expands his catechesis series on the family at today's general audience. 6 weeks out, working through the final details of the Pope's visit to Philadelphia for the World Meeting of Families. And Handcrafted gift. An artist hopes a pastoral staff he's creating will be given to Pope Francis in Philadelphia. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, August 12th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton will now hand over her personal email server to the Justice Department. Clinton says she used her private email account for official business as a matter of convenience. She insists it never held classified information. Meanwhile, on the campaign trail, GOP candidate Jeb Bush blames Clinton for the growth of ISIS. Jason Calvi reports from the White House. Jason?
Brian, in his bid to win the White House, the former Florida governor says under Clinton's watch, ISIS grew. He says they disengaged from the Middle East and ignored the threat. Now Bush is laying out his own proposal to fight ISIS in his first major foreign policy address last night.
One of the gravest threats we face today comes from radical Islamic terrorists.
Jeb Bush speaking at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. He accused Hillary Clinton and President Obama of allowing the Islamic State to take hold of the Middle East.
It is not true and was wishful thinking by the administration to claim that the tide of war is receding. The reality is that radical Islam has been spreading like a pandemic.
Bush says the U.S. needs more ground troops in Iraq to defeat ISIS. He links the group's rise to U.S. forces leaving Iraq in 2011.
The administration of his brother was responsible for negotiating the agreement for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq. On the other hand, there is some blame to be apportioned to the Obama administration for its handling of Iraq.
Bush said last night that Christians are facing persecution and being forced to flee the region. Senior Bush administration official Joe Wood says Presidents Bush and Obama didn't deal with the problem.
Christians in Iraq suffered enormously in 2007 and 2008 from Islamist militants, many of whom may well now be associated with ISIS and ISIL, but who were essentially doing all they could to purge Christians from the areas where they lived in northern Iraq.
Clinton is not only facing challenges from her Republican rivals. In a new poll put out by the Boston Herald of New Hampshire voters, it puts Vermont's Senator Bernie Sanders 7 points ahead of Clinton. Brian?
Jason Calvi at the White House. Thank you, Jason. Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Former President Jimmy Carter says he has cancer. He says he will undergo treatment at an Atlanta hospital. Carter, who is now 90, had liver surgery earlier this month, which he says revealed his cancer. Carter, a former Georgia governor, served as America's 39th president in the late 1970s. Well, an image circulating online today appears to show a Croatian hostage beheaded by ISIS. This would be the first killing of a foreign captive in Egypt since ISIS terrorists got a foothold there last year. Croatian authorities aren't yet confirming the death of the man kidnapped last month in Egypt. Croatia's prime minister says he fears the worst because what they see looks horrific. A raging forest fire spreading across one of Portugal's most treasured national parks may now be contained. Hundreds of firefighters with nearly 100 vehicles were fighting the blaze. Helicopters and planes were also mobilized during daylight hours. The conditions seem to have improved some overnight, helping crews to gain control of this fire. An exceptionally dry winter and spring have increased that region's risk of forest fires. Nearly 350 migrants rescued by the Italian Coast Guard Monday are resting tonight in Sicily. Captain Giuseppe Maggio says many received medical care on board his ship. More than 50 women and around 60 children were rescued with that group. Most of the 1,500 migrants rescued in 7 different operations this week are from Africa and the Middle East. Pope Francis expands his catechesis on the family at today's general audience. One of his 3 new teaching points is a Christian approach to work.
Milioni di uomini e donne e addirittura bambini schiavi del lavoro.
Pope Francis saying that millions of men and women, even children, are slaves to work. He said this is against God and against the dignity of the human person. Our Rome correspondent Alan Holdren joins us. Well, coming off his catechesis series on the family, what will Pope Francis focus on in the weeks ahead at his Wednesday audience?
Pope Francis announced this morning, Brian, that he's going to be focusing on work, prayer, and celebration. This morning he spoke specifically about celebration, festa in Italian. He said that God himself invented celebration. He included Sunday as a free day, as the day of rest in that idea of celebration.
And how did he specifically encourage us to keep the Lord's Day sacred?
He talked about participating in the Sunday Eucharist, receiving communion, also building community there at Mass and also in our families in particular, in our communities. He said that people should spend any time they can in celebration to look on their work, also which includes their children, to look at what they're doing, to contemplate, just like God did on the seventh day of creation, and say, this is good, and see what can be changed, see what the challenges are. He invited people to protect that time. In this day and age, he said, when ideologies aim to promote profit-seeking or also technical efficiency over this celebration. He said celebration threatens to be eaten up by that ideology.
In our 24/7 culture, did he not address also this idea that work is constant, especially for some?
That's right. He said, Brian, that there are millions of people worldwide who are enslaved. He said that those numbers also include many children. He said that we are masters of work, just like God is a master of work. He said that it would be against our own human dignity and against God to live and work as slaves. He invited people to celebrate anything and everything, really, including birthdays, weddings, and any other reason for celebration.
And Alan, I understand that the general audience has been moved into Paul VI Hall. I guess it's pretty hot there in Rome.
That's right, Brian. It was about 93 degrees today, so the air conditioning inside the Paul VI Hall felt really good. I imagine the other 7,000 people who were there felt the same way. This will continue throughout the month. At least we foresee that it will be.
All right, from Rome, Alan Holdren, our correspondent there. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Brian.
And in a newly released undercover Planned Parenthood video, a former technician who harvested aborted baby parts says Planned Parenthood disregards patient consent. Holly O'Donnell, a former STEM Express employee, is being called a whistleblower. STEM Express purchases aborted baby parts from Planned Parenthood facilities. O'Donnell says potential pregnancies are viewed as potential specimens. She also claims her former co-workers would not get consent from women before harvesting tissue. She grew more and more concerned before finally leaving her job.
I'm not gonna tell a girl to kill her baby so I can get money. And that's what this company does. Straight up, that's what this company does. There's a reason why they keep journals in the recovery room. Like, if abortion was a good thing, there wouldn't be so much emotional damage from it.
Today's video is the 6th released by the Center for Medical Progress. Dr. David Prentice is vice president of the Charlotte Lozier Institute, a pro-life research group. What do you see as most significant about this latest video?
Well, Brian, what leapt out at me was this lack of consenting, that they're just taking this aborted baby and then parting him or her out for their grisly organ trade.
So these abortive mothers have no clue that their babies are going to be pieced apart and sold.
It's very unlikely. We actually obtained one of the consent forms that showed up in this 6th video. And it starts off by talking about how fetal tissue has been used to treat and cure Parkinson's, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, AIDS. Now, I don't think that's the truth, but it makes these mothers think that they're donating tissue for life-saving research when the fact is actually those babies are being parted out and Planned Parenthood is getting cash for those parts.
And please explain your claim that this type of research is really outdated.
Well, it really is. In almost a century of fetal tissue transplant research, the best results, frankly, were in 2001 and 2003, where Parkinson's patients, over half of them, were made worse, talking about uncontrollable movements and so on. Vaccine development. Back in the 50s and the 60s, fetal tissue was the only thing we knew how to grow in the lab. But since then, most vaccines are not made using fetal tissue. In fact, there was an associate director of the NIH apparently claimed that the recent Ebola vaccine, good news about 10 days ago at the end of July, that it relied on fetal tissue. It was critical. We checked it. No fetal tissue used in the Ebola vaccine.
Are we talking about adult stem cells then?
Adult stem cells, umbilical cord blood stem cells, which have already helped over 1 million patients.
And which are morally acceptable.
That's right.
Because there are no lives taken. So why then this demand for these parts of aborted children?
Yeah, you know, Brian, I think there are some scientists who are still living in this outdated world, the idea that fetal tissue is better, it grows faster, and so on. When again, as we've already said, there are illicit and successful ways to do the research without resorting to this grisly organ trade.
And there are many other moral concerns with this practice, right?
There are, and let's not lose sight of the source of this tissue and organ. As the first video said, the crunching, the painful, horrific way that these young children are destroyed and their lives ended to part them out so that Planned Parenthood can make a little extra money.
It is so hard to hear that, but it's necessary that we do. Dr. David Prentice, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, Pope Francis pops up all over the Philadelphia area in cardboard form. And we update you on the last few weeks of planning for the World Meeting of Families. Moments of rest, especially on Sunday, are sacred because in them we find God. That's a quote from the general audience of Pope Francis today. Thanks for joining us this Wednesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Well, Pope Francis is beginning to pop up all around Philadelphia in cardboard cutouts. Catherine Zeltner has that story.
His official visit is still weeks away, but Pope Francis has been popping up throughout the Philadelphia area.
We love having Pope Francis at Eastern State. We would love to have the real Pope Francis, but this is the best we're going to get, and we're thrilled to have it.
The creators of the Pope cutouts are trying to generate excitement for Francis's first U.S. trip.
It's scheduled at many different locations, and then people can just come, take a picture, share their pictures on social media.
The Paper Pontiff, a draw wherever he goes.
I thought, let me take a picture and post it on my Facebook page and show them all that I met the Pope in person.
Tourists and locals wanting to get close with the people's Pope.
I think he's done a great job. I'm just kind of sad I'm not going to be in the city when he comes.
In Wilmington, Delaware, Krista Scaley's and Paul Tanner's Francis is smiling and waving.
Even though it's just a cardboard image, it has that Francis effect that's going around, and everyone's just, they jump for it.
Give me a really big smile.
While the pictures are a fun memento, those escorting the Pope around hope it leaves a lasting impression.
Essentially, let's all be a little kinder, nicer to one another. We're all in the same world. Be more peaceful, more kind, more patient.
Lessons the real Pope will touch upon when he arrives in town.
Thank you.
Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
He really does.
Thank you, Catherine. Father William Donovan is liaison from the Archdiocese of Philadelphia to the Pontifical Council for the Family. And Father, as you work out the final details for next month's World Meeting of Families, where are you in the process?
Well, Brian, we're 6 weeks out, and it's a time of great excitement and great activity. As you know, the World Meeting of Family is 3 great events. First is the Congress from Tuesday to Friday. Then Saturday evening, there is a Festival of Families, a culture and artistic celebration in the presence of the Holy Father. And the third great event is Sunday, the closing Mass on the Parkway in the city of Philadelphia. So the Congress will have basically 15,000 participants from all over the world. So from Tuesday to Friday, we'll have the logistics to take care of their hospitality, housing, food, transportation, and then of course the weekend will be really a papal weekend in the great city of Philadelphia.
Father, describe the partnership between the Archdiocese of Philadelphia and the Vatican in this World Meeting of Families.
Sure, Brian. The World Meeting of Family was founded 20 years ago by Pope St. John Paul II, and it's an international gathering every 3 years, and it's co-sponsored by the Vatican and the hosting Archdiocese. So the Philadelphia is the 8th Archdiocese to host this, and we partner with the Vatican, specifically with the Pontifical Council for the Family. And I've been here at the Vatican for the last year and a half at the Pontifical Council of the Family as Archbishop Chapuis's liaison.
Well, certainly the timing of this is very critical, leading into the Synod on the Families, just coming off the U.S. Supreme Court decision legally redefining marriage. Will that be addressed in the Congress?
Sure. We live in a rather pluralistic society, and one of the challenges is to have to come together and move forward for the common good. During the Congress, we'll have many different presentations will address all the challenges, not only some of these new socio-cultural constructs, but also challenges to the family, whether it be poverty, immigration, caring for the elderly, maybe communications with the family, growth in spirituality, but all kinds of challenges, maybe health and so forth. So divorce, families impacted by divorce or same-sex attractions, all of these issues that are impacting families today will be addressed in various conferences during the Congress.
All right, Father William Donovan joining us from Rome. Thank you for all your good work, Father, and we're looking forward to covering the World Meeting of Families. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. God bless you.
Up next, we continue to see the effects of the Supreme Court's decision legally redefining marriage. And we'll show you a special handcrafted gift for Pope Francis from a New Jersey artist. Amen, I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. From today's Gospel according to St. Matthew. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday evening, August 12th. I'm Brian Patrick. We have reaction tonight to a controversial judicial order in Ohio. Judges performing marriages cannot refuse to marry same-sex couples on personal, moral, or religious grounds. Judges who stop performing all marriages in protest may be seen as biased and disqualified from any case involving sexual orientation. The state's Judicial Conduct Board's decision is non-binding, but it may be used by the Ohio Supreme Court for guidance. Kerri Kupec is Legal Communications Director for the Alliance Defending Freedom. Kerri, how much weight does this ruling carry outside of Ohio?
Well, obviously this ruling is limited to Ohio, but the fact that this kind of opinion could be issued in the United States of America is quite disturbing. It's really sending a clear message to the rest of the country. If you dare to have a belief about marriage as a man-woman unit, which I'd like to add was the law of the land up to a number of weeks ago, we can run you out of your career and your lives. Everybody, regardless of where they stand on the issue of marriage, should be really disturbed by that kind of level of state coercion.
And the language in Ohio, in this Ohio ruling, is very strong, isn't it?
Honestly, it's among the most extreme that I have seen to date. For starters, judges are not even required to perform marriage ceremonies in Ohio, which is very interesting. You know, that's the first thing we need to address. This is not an official part of their job duties, but what this opinion says is that if you do them, or if you have done them, you can no longer have religious conviction about marriage. So it says that if you want to just marry opposite sex couples because of your religious convictions and not same sex, you can't do that. But they go a step further, and this is where it gets particularly extreme. They say, if you decide now to get out of the marriage business altogether, we're going to call into question your ability to be a judge in other areas of law.
So you're not required as a judge to do weddings. If you're already doing them and you say, I'm not doing any anymore, that is going to be construed as a a protest, I guess?
And that's what the opinion says. In fact, it says, so they give some examples. They say it's if a same-sex couple comes before this judge and it's an issue of domestic violence, clearly has nothing to do with marriage. They say that judge's ability to neutrally arbitrate that matter could be questionable. But they go even further and they say in all areas of their official job duties. And then they go even one step further and say the entire judiciary of Ohio can be called into question. So basically what they're saying is you must participate in these same-sex marriage ceremonies or we're going to run you out of being a judge.
And so there's no more room for religious freedom in this system.
You know, it's really sad. In a diverse melting pot like America, there should be room, and there is room for people to have differing beliefs and to peacefully live those beliefs out. But we're seeing that's not the case anymore. What this board is saying in Ohio, and quite frankly, it's reflective of what we're seeing across the country in a lot of ways, that you must believe, you must speak, you must act, and you must reject a belief about marriage that has been held across race, culture, time, and millennia. And if you don't, we're going to punish you and we're going to run you out of your career.
So the church and probably other nonprofits need to be paying attention to this.
Well, this is obviously limited to these judges, but sure, we're seeing the same kind of conform or else ideology applied to small business owners, the Atlanta fire chief, public officials, public employees. So how could we not expect the church and religious nonprofits to take the next hit?
Very troubling. From the Alliance Defending Freedom, Kerri Kupec, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, a New Jersey sculptor gets closer to completing a unique work of art. He has spent hours handcrafting a crozier that's a pastoral staff inspired by the upcoming World Meeting of Families. As Wyatt Goolsby reports tonight, it's a gift intended for Pope Francis.
If you listen carefully near this tranquil home in South Jersey, you may be able to make out the sound of carving. In the backyard, you'll find Frank Cedar in his workshop. The 65-year-old is hard at work on a gift for Pope Francis. He spent more than 100 hours on this crozier he's calling the Staff of the Good Shepherd.
Now, Frank has been thinking about this crozier for a little bit over a year now. He's played with several different designs, and he had the final one up here on the wall. We have a logo of the World Meeting of Families, the Holy Family itself, at the top of the crozier. Right underneath that, you have the chalice with the Eucharist, and underneath that are 3 lilies, which represents the Trinity. And throughout the crozier, there are vines. He says that represents us, the people, who cling to our shepherd.
As a nod to the Pope's roots, the main part of the staff is purple wood, imported from South America. He will also use olive wood from Italy and maple wood from America.
Christ is depicted with the staff many times as our Good Shepherd.
Frank and his family are devout Catholics. Over the decades, he's created gifts for Pope Benedict and presented a sculpture to Pope John Paul II.
Gives you an incredible feeling. It was very rewarding, spiritually.
Frank will be the first to tell you he's not looking for personal recognition or money, and there's no guarantee the Pope will receive the gift when he comes to the U.S. in September. But he says if local children have the chance to present it, that would be his dream.
I think it was done out of a work of worship or an act of worship, but if it gets into the hands of Pope Francis, his reaction, if he knew everything, I would think that he would be very pleased.
And so Frank continues to carve in his backyard, as he sees it, a way of talking to the Lord every day. In New Jersey, Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, Wyatt, I notice he's put a little of his own sweat and blood there. He's got a bandaged up finger, but beautiful work, and we appreciate that good story. Thanks, Wyatt Goolsby. Well, until tomorrow, we encourage you to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. You can always watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. On this 12th day of August, a Wednesday, we leave you revisiting Pope Francis's general audience today in Rome's Paul VI Hall. Good night and God bless you.